Good morning, you're watching A News. I'm Dilek Tuna. Here are the headlines for the hour. Trump is set to meet Putin in Alaska today in a push for Ukraine peace. Russia and Ukraine exchange prisoners of war on the eve of the Trump-Putin summit. Israeli minister announces plans for new West Bank settlement. The UN urges Tel Aviv to stop advancement. All eyes will be on Friday's summit in Alaska later as the high-level push for peace in Ukraine between US President Donald Trump and Russian President Vladimir Putin happens at 11:30 local time. It'll be the first time the two leaders will have met in 6 years. The closely watched summit could set the stage for a new chapter in one of Europe's deadliest conflicts.
Security will be tight in Anchorage in Alaska as US President Donald Trump and Russian President Vladimir Putin prepare to meet Friday morning. It'll be the first time they've had face-to-face talks in 6 years. The main aim is for a breakthrough towards ending the war in Ukraine. The summit will be held at a secure US military base near the city and comes 1 week after Trump's deadline for Moscow to agree to a ceasefire or face new sanctions. While Kiev and Moscow remain far apart after more than 3 years of war, Trump has expressed hope that his personal rapport with Putin could open the door to peace. Speaking to reporters on Thursday, Trump estimated there was a 25% chance the talks would fail, but insisted he believed Putin was ready to end the war. He suggested that any lasting peace would likely require a second round of talks, this time involving Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky and possibly European leaders.
Some very concerning reports about.
And I think President Putin will make peace. I think President Zelensky will make peace. We'll see if they can get along. And if they can, it'll be great.
Zelensky, who has been excluded from Friday's meeting, has warned that any agreement reached without Ukraine's participation would be meaningless. In recent days, he and his European allies have stepped up efforts to ensure Washington does not strike a deal with Moscow that could leave Ukraine exposed to future attacks. The summit's location has drawn a mix of journalists and summer tourists to Alaska, though the only visible signs of the high-profile meeting are the heightened security and influx of media crews. Putin, meanwhile, convened his top ministers and security officials ahead of the summit, underscoring the potential for the meeting to shape the endgame to the largest European conflict since the Second World War.
Meanwhile, Russia and Ukraine have carried out their latest prisoner exchange, each side releasing 84 soldiers in a deal brokered by the United Arab Emirates. Footage released by the Russian Defense Ministry shows freed Russian troops cheering, opening their national flag and boarding buses in Belarus, where they'll receive medical and psychological care before returning home. Kiev soldiers were also handed back under the agreement. The UAE played a key role in mediating the exchange, though details of the negotiations were not disclosed. A News reporting from Kharkiv brings you an exclusive update from the frontline. Our team spoke with Ole Sushnitsky, spokesperson for the Kharkiv Operational Tactical Group, about the intense battles in Volchansk and Liptsi. He details how Ukrainian forces are holding their positions, repelling Russian assaults and preventing any enemy advances.
Ситуація на південно-слобожанському напрямку залишається складною.
The situation in the southern Slobodansky sector remains difficult, with Ukraine's defense forces continuing to carry out combat missions. As before, the enemy's main objective is the city of Vovchansk, where fighting and assaults take place daily. The enemy attacks in small infantry groups of 2 to 3 soldiers with active drone support. In the city itself, Ukraine's defense forces control an area near the aggregate plant. The enemy keeps trying to assault this position to push our forces back behind the natural barrier of the Vovcha River. However, they have been unable to achieve this in recent times. Our forces continue to defend their territory and positions, giving the enemy no opportunity for success. The enemy has also intensified activity near the village of Lipsy. In May 2025, Ukraine's defense forces drove them out of positions in the forest area north of Lipsy. Now, the enemy is attempting to retake these positions, having suffered heavy losses in manpower and armor during their previous defeat there. They want to reclaim them, but our forces are preventing this. The situation remains under control, with Lipsy currently under the control of Ukraine's defense forces. The enemy has been stopped there, with no further advance.
Ворога там було зупинено, і просування противника там немає.
Staying on the front line of Ukraine, a news crew led by Fikret Dolukhanov was able to speak to the commander of a unit from the 57th Motorized Brigade, known as Paton, on the Ukraine front line. In this exclusive account, the commander shares his perspective on the intense fighting in Volchansk, describing how his men held their positions against overwhelming Russian forces. This is a rare interview into the reality of Ukraine's defense, told by one of those leading on the ground.
Противник не стоїть на місці, він діє по-різному, різні маневри, різні в нього.
My specific task, and that of my men, is to hold back the enemy. My job is to command the battle, to provide for the lads, and to destroy the enemy. The first and most important thing is the lives of all my brothers in arms, all my fighters, all our men. We do a lot of work to ensure that. We face all sorts of situations. The enemy doesn't stand still. They act in different ways, use different maneuvers, try different tactics, but we also stand firm. We see how everything unfolds, and we try to act faster than the enemy. That means thinking faster, acting faster, because they have more manpower, much more, but we cope. Let me tell you one particular story. Not so long ago, the enemy organized an assault. If I recall correctly, there were 13 or 14 tracked vehicles, each crammed with at least 30 enemy troops. I don't know what they were thinking. They just stuck them on top, in a sort of covered frame, and sent them in. They wanted to storm the aggregate plant. This was shown on the news, all over the world. The first to meet the vehicles was Mulia. His position was near a park, in open ground, and the enemy drove straight through the middle of that park. He met them with a machine gun. Not one man was left alive in the first vehicle, just wreckage. When the second vehicle approached and positions began to be taken apart, its troops started jumping out, having seen the first one burning. They jumped earlier. Mulia and his comrade, just 2 men, were there to meet them. They certainly destroyed about half of them. The rest scattered like ants in all directions, digging in immediately. He had to pull back slightly to one building, to his secondary position, which allowed him to control the situation. The enemy entered exactly where Mulia wanted them to. He had prepared the position to look safer from their perspective, drawing them in. Once they gathered there, the explosives were triggered. Tripwires and other charges went off. Mulia was already wounded at that point, with a through-and-through gunshot wound to his right forearm. Even while injured, he blocked that room, preventing any surviving enemy from leaving. Several times they were offered the chance to surrender. They never responded, only fired back. Like a true Cossack, Mulia decided not to wait for them to regroup, but to clear the building. I personally commanded the clearance, assisting him from the air, making drops, coordinating with reconnaissance, and directing his movements. In the end, when they'd cleared all the rooms, they captured 2 servicemen from a Russian rifle brigade. I can't recall which exactly. One was severely wounded, bleeding out, with no real chance of survival. Yet even though he was the enemy, he was given medical aid. Perhaps that's just human decency. You'd have to ask Mulia himself what he was thinking. The man died anyway, leaving 1 prisoner. There have been many such stories. Mulia has always held positions firmly. We had some very important positions. I won't name them. Once, they fought inside a building. The enemy was on one side of the wall. They were on the other, just a couple of meters apart. The enemy outnumbered them. For Mulia, it took no more than 3 or 4 hours to eliminate them all. The result is always the same. He tells them to surrender. They refuse. They're warned. They don't listen. And they end up fertilizing the earth. When the war will end, no one knows how or when that will be. We have brothers who have given their lives for our future. I will probably organize search operations to find all the fighters I can, those who remain, in the sky and in the ground.
Я буду організовувати пошукові роботи та шукати всіх бійців, яких зможу знайти, які залишились на небі.
Over to Israel, and the finance minister has announced a major settlement expansion in the West Bank in a move that could cut the territory in two. The E1 settlement plan, froze for decades under global pressure, is revived, despite warnings it will destroy any prospect of a Palestinian state.
Israel's finance minister Bezalel Smotrich stood in the settlement of Ma'ale Adumim to declare what he called a historic breakthrough, the revival of the E1 settlement project. If built, it would link Ma'ale Adumim to Jerusalem, effectively cutting the West Bank into two separate areas.
Whoever in the world is trying to recognize a Palestinian state today will receive our answer on the ground, not with documents nor with decisions or statements, but with facts. Facts of houses, facts of neighborhoods, roads, and of more and more Jewish families building lives. They will speak of the false Palestinian dream. We will continue to build a fulfilling Jewish reality. This reality definitively buries the idea of a Palestinian state, simply because there is nothing to recognize and no one to recognize.
The E1 plan has been frozen since 2012, under pressure from the United States, the European Union and the United Nations, who view Israeli settlements in the West Bank as illegal under international law.
Smotrich celebration of the killing of the potential of a Palestinian state is actually a celebration of the killing of the future of Israel. We all know today that the only way to have peace and to even defeat Hamas is by having a Palestinian state side by side with Israel.
The UN and rights group say that building E1 would not only violate the Fourth Geneva Convention, but also create a physical barrier to a viable Palestinian state, undermining decades of internationally backed peace efforts. Smotrich insists that the plan has full support from Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and US President Donald Trump, though neither has confirmed this publicly.
Everything I do in the Judea and Samaria is being done in full coordination with Netanyahu and with his blessing, and with our friends in the White House, with President Trump, with his team.
Palestinian leaders condemned the move, with the foreign ministry calling it part of a systemic policy of annexation and displacement.
The American administration should put enough pressure on the Israelis to stop this provocation, this illegal decisions and proposals, and we hope that the world community will never allow Israel to force its laws on the Palestinian land.
The E1 development is expected to receive final approval next week. Its revival comes as several European nations prepare to formally recognize a Palestinian state in September.
Meanwhile, the United Nations has urged Israel to reverse its plan to revive the long-delayed E1 settlement project in the West Bank, warning it could effectively destroy any two-state solution. UN spokesman Stefan Dujarric said such settlements go against international law and further entrench the occupation. Construction in the E1 area would sever the northern and southern West Bank, severely undermining the prospects for a realisation of a viable, contiguous Palestinian state. Over in Tel Aviv, demonstrators set tyres ablaze and blocked traffic on the Ayalon highway on Thursday, demanding the release of hostages held in Gaza. Police said at least 12 people were detained, including protester Katia Armoza, who was arrested mid-interview. Israeli officials say 50 hostages remain in Gaza, with about 20 believed to be alive. In other news, Air Canada is heading into a turbulent weekend, with most flights expected to be cancelled as thousands of flight attendants prepare to strike over pay. The walkout could affect more than 100,000 passengers and disrupt the busy summer travel season.
Air Canada is bracing for major travel chaos, cancelling most of its 700 daily flights ahead of a possible strike action by 10,000 unionised flight attendants on Saturday. The carrier says more than 500 flight journeys will be scrapped by Friday, disrupting plans for some 100,000 passengers. Executives say winding down service early is necessary given the complexity of its global network, and restarting could take up to a week.
We want a contract. We don't want to go on strike. We don't want our passengers to be suffering. This is not something that we want. We love our passengers. It's our livelihood. We don't want to be out of a paycheck. We want to get back to the table and discuss.
The dispute centres on pay for work outside flight time, including boarding and ground duties. The union says current offers fall below minimum wage and want full compensation for roughly 35 unpaid hours a month.
The compensation that they offered was minutes that were not the full amount of time that we actually are doing this groundwork that they say, and it was compensated at 50%. If I could just take the lowest, one of the lowest rates that we are paid, it's about $30 an hour, it would still be under minimum wage. How can we accept that? We're in Canada. The federal minimum wage is $17.75.
Passengers at Toronto Pearson International Airport voiced both frustration and support. Many rushed to rebook flights to avoid cancellations, calling the demands fair.
Flight was for Sunday, but we have to anticipate the flight to avoid the probable strike. So it's not comfortable, but I think that from what I read about this strike, it's a very fair demand they are doing, like they have to be paid.
If the return flight is cancelled, then definitely, something needs to be arranged immediately to come back, because once all the things are done, then either the Air Canada has to provide another flight, or the office has to see what needs to be done, because nobody can really stay more than the stipulated period. I think it really affects everything.
A strike at the height of summer travel could hit Canada's tourism industry hard. Air Canada has asked the government to impose arbitration, a move the union opposes.
The US brokered peace agreement between Azerbaijan and Armenia is going to open up new political and economic opportunities in the South Caucasus. Both leaders say their neighbours will benefit.
The leaders of Azerbaijan and Armenia have said that they are not concerned about potential reactions from Iran and Russia following the US-mediated peace agreement. They believe the deal, that was initiated at summit in Washington on the 8th of August, will create new economic and political opportunities in the region while providing strategic advantages to neighbouring countries. In exclusive interviews with Fox News, Armenian Prime Minister Nikol Pashinyan and Azerbaijani President Ilham Aliyev praised US President Donald Trump and his envoy for their role in brokering the agreement last week. President Aliyev said there is no reason for any country to view the deal negatively. He said that today we have taken the final step towards peace. He also noted that the Zangezur corridor is not directed against any country and will become an important part of international transport routes. Pashinyan added that the agreement offers tangible benefits for Iran and Russia, including a railway link from the Persian Gulf to the Black Sea. The core element of the agreement is the 27-mile Trump route for international peace and prosperity transit corridor. The route will connect mainland Azerbaijan with its Nakhchivan exclave, passing through Armenian territory. Armenia has granted the US exclusive development rights for the corridor and related infrastructure for 99 years, covering roads, railways, pipelines, fibre optic lines and power transmission networks. Russia's Ministry of Foreign Affairs described the deal as positive, expressing hope for stability in the South Caucasus. At the same time, Moscow stressed caution regarding foreign involvement and highlighted the importance of including neighbours such as Russia, Iran and Turkey in regional solutions. Iran's foreign ministry also welcomed the Washington agreement as an important step toward lasting regional peace, but warned against any foreign intervention near its borders that could undermine the region's security and lasting stability.
Romania is calling for its Black Sea security partnership with Turkey and Bulgaria to expand a joint task force that clears mines in its waters. The Defence Minister says patrols are needed to protect vital trade routes and energy infrastructure from possible Russian threats.
Romania says NATO allies Turkey and Bulgaria should broaden their Black Sea task force to include regular patrols, building on current mine-clearing operations. Romanian Defence Minister says the expanded mission would safeguard energy facilities, shipping lanes and freedom of navigation.
We have joint projects with Turkey and Bulgaria. For example, now we have a project to demine the Black Sea. We work very well together with the Bulgarian and Turkish allies. And this project will have to be expanded to a patrol project in the coming years. We have to stay connected because everything that will happen in the Black Sea must be done jointly with our allies.
Formed last year, the three-nation force was created to deal with drifting sea mines, a persistent hazard since Russia's 2022 invasion of Ukraine. Several commercial ships carrying grain and oil have been damaged in the region. Romania shares a 650-kilometer land border with Ukraine and has reported Russian drone fragments falling on its territory during the war. In the Black Sea, Mosteanu cited near-daily attempts to jam GPS signals, which Romania blames on Russia. Romania is also preparing to become the EU's largest gas producer by 2027 with an offshore Black Sea project that will make it a net exporter.
Georgia's foreign trade has hit new highs. Government data shows record-breaking exports and trade turnover in the first 7 months of 2025, continuing the upward trend seen last year. The Ministry of Economy says exports rose nearly 9% to more than $3.5 million, the highest on record. Imports climbed almost 11% to just above $10.3 billion, though July saw a drop of nearly 7% from the previous month. Total trade turnover grew by more than 10% to around $14.1 billion, also a record. The US State Department has accused Kabul of widespread human rights violations, particularly targeting women and girls in its annual human rights report. Our correspondent Tamim Bahis has more from Kabul.
According to the report, edicts issued in 2024 further restricted women's and girls' access to education, employment and freedom of movement, effectively removing them from public spaces and diminishing fundamental civil and political rights. These measures, the State Department says, mark a significant deterioration in the situation. Meanwhile, the United Nations and several international human rights organizations have documented similar patterns. Bans on secondary and university education for females, restriction on public spaces, harsh dress code enforcement, and forced expulsion from media and NGO sectors. In particular, women and girls remain the most severely affected. The Taliban continue to limit their education, ban them from many workplaces, including healthcare training, and severely curtail their mobility and basic freedoms. A News reached out to the Afghan Foreign Ministry for comment, but no response has been received. This is Tamim Bahis in Kabul for A News.
And that's all from us from Baku for now. Stay tuned to A News for more updates and have a lovely morning.